before the Heresy, before chaos whispered its promises, before the galaxy burned, there was a legion of warriors whose name inspired awe across the stars. The Luna Wolves, first among the Emperor's sons, and among them stood a man who would one day eclipse them all. His name was Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves, and right hand to the Warmaster Horus Lupercal. He was not born of Terra, nor of Mars, nor of any world that would ever know peace. He was shaped by war, sculpted by loyalty and tempered by the fire of duty. To the men who followed him, he was a symbol, the blade of the Warmaster made flesh. To the galaxy, he would become a shadow stretching across eternity. But in those first golden years before betrayal stained the stars, Abaddon was a hero. The great crusade burned across the heavens like a wildfire. Worlds that had been lost to darkness for millennia were brought once more beneath the light of the Imperium of Man. Legions marched, empires fell, and at their head the sons of the Emperor led the charge, demigods clad in ceramite and faith. The Luna Wolves were the first among them, their banners white and proud, their thunderous war cry echoing across entire continents. Lupercal for the Warmaster. They were swift, efficient, merciless. A reflection of their father, Horus, the most beloved of all the Primarchs. And among his chosen, one warrior shone brightest. Abaddon, first captain, commander of the Justaeran Terminator elite. He was the voice that followed Horus's silence, the sword that struck where his master pointed, fierce, loyal, absolute. He was not a thinker like Loken, nor a poet like Tarek Torgadon. He was steel, pure and unyielding, forged for one purpose: victory. And in that purpose he found peace. In those days, his loyalty was not to chaos or conquest, it was to unity, to the dream of a galaxy bound together under the light of the Emperor of mankind. A dream Horus shared, a dream Abaddon believed in with all the fire of a son's devotion. When he looked upon his Primarch, he saw not a god, but something greater, a man who had earned his greatness. Horus laughed, fought, and bled beside his sons. He did not command from thrones or temples. He led from the front, his voice carrying through the roar of bolter fire like sunlight through storm. Abaddon was proud to serve him, proud to kill for him, and though he would never say it aloud, he loved him. It was a love born not of weakness but of respect, the bond between creation and creator. For Horus was more than a general. He was a vision of what mankind could become, strong, unified, eternal. Those were golden years, though none knew it then. The legions were brothers. The Primarchs were united. Even the Emperor himself walked among his sons, guiding them toward a dawn that seemed inevitable. Abaddon remembered the parades on conquered worlds, the cheers of liberated citizens, the silence of victory beneath alien suns. He remembered the warmth of pride, that quiet certainty that the future was theirs. No one questioned, no one doubted, they believed, but beneath the light the shadows were growing. Whispers traveled between fleets. The word-bearers kneeling where they should have conquered, their faith turning from science to worship. The imperial truth, once sacred, was being questioned in secret halls. And Horus, the Warmaster who had united the stars, began to change. It started with wounds unseen, doubts whispered in the dark, envy disguised as humility. Abaddon noticed before others did. He saw the way Horus lingered after victories, silent, his gaze distant. He saw the weariness in his eyes, the hesitation before each new campaign. But he did not question. For to question Horus was to doubt perfection. And Abaddon was incapable of doubt. He believed in his master even as others began to falter. He defended him in councils where politics replaced purpose. He silenced those who spoke ill of him. And when the Emperor returned to Terra, leaving Horus in command of the Great Crusade, Abaddon swore a private oath. Where he leads, I will follow. Where he stands, I will fight. Where he falls, I will avenge. It was not a prayer. It was a promise. The years that followed blurred together. Campaigns upon campaigns, stars upon stars. Abaddon became legend, his name whispered across entire sectors. Planets surrendered at the sight of his banners. Enemies broke before his fury, and yet, even amid triumph, he felt the faintest tremor. A sense that something vast and unseen was moving behind the veil of the universe. He dismissed it as exhaustion, the echo of too many battles, too much blood. But in the warp, unseen eyes had turned toward him. For every oath sworn in loyalty is a chain waiting to be broken, and every man who worships another is already half-damned. One night, aboard the vengeful spirit, Abaddon stood before the viewing deck watching a captured world burn. Its oceans boiled beneath orbital bombardment, its skies turned to glass. He felt no triumph, only silence. Horus stood beside him. The Warmaster's face was calm, but his eyes, those brilliant, commanding eyes, had changed. They gleamed with something deeper than thought, something older, something hungry. "Ezekiel," Horus said softly, "do you ever wonder if the Emperor truly understands what he asks of us?" Abaddon hesitated. It was not the question that disturbed him. It was the tone, quiet, curious, almost human. He answered as he always had. "We were not made to understand, my lord. We were made to obey." Horus smiled faintly, not with joy, with sadness. And in that smile, something in Abaddon shifted, though he could not yet name it. He would remember that night forever, the night when faith began to change its shape. The stars burned on, the legions marched, and in the quiet between wars, destiny waited. Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain, the son of Horus, did not yet know that the dream he fought for was already dead. The great crusade was nearing its end. World after world had bowed before the might of the Imperium. The legions were legends now, armies of demigods that had turned the night itself into empire, and at their head stood the Warmaster, Horus Lupercal, chosen son, favored child, the Emperor's pride. For a time it seemed as though nothing could undo what they had built. But even stars, for all their brilliance, burned themselves hollow in the end. Abaddon remembered the day his master was wounded. They were on Davenstan, a world of festering jungles and treacherous skies, long forgotten by reason. A rebellion had risen there, small, insignificant, not worthy of a Primarch's hand. And yet Horus led the assault himself. When the battle ended, the planet burned. The traitors were dead. But so was something else. Horus had fallen. Struck by a weapon of impossible corruption, his flesh dying and rotting from within. The greatest of the Emperor's sons lay broken, and the universe seemed to hold its breath. Abaddon was at his side when the healers failed. He watched the apothecaries weep, the priests plead, and the legion falter in their silence. Even the remembrancers ceased their endless writing. The vengeful spirit became a tomb. Abaddon did not cry. He did not pray. He simply stood guard outside his Primarch's chamber, a statue of defiance against despair. He did not notice the priests of Davin arrive. He did not hear their whispered promises. He only knew that when the doors opened again, his master was standing, and something had changed. Horus's eyes were different, no longer mortal, no longer merely human. They burned faintly with unseen light, the reflection of stars that did not belong to any sky. When he spoke, his voice was deeper, resonant, layered with something vast. Abaddon fell to one knee out of instinct, his body responding before his mind. He thought it reverence. It was submission. "Rise, my son," Horus said. "We have been blind. The Emperor has lied to us." Those words would echo in Abaddon's mind for the rest of eternity. The Warmaster spoke of truth, hidden, terrible truth. He said the emperor was not a man but a thief of divinity, who had stolen the power of the gods and hoarded it. He said the Imperium was not salvation but a prison built on deceit. He said that man's destiny was not obedience but apotheosis. And in Horus's voice, Abaddon heard conviction, not madness, not delusion, conviction. The others faltered. Loken questioned, Aximon doubted, the captains whispered. But Abaddon believed. He had to believe. He had followed Horus through 1,000 wars, through light and shadow alike. If this was the next campaign, then so be it. Even if it led against the Emperor himself. "If you say he is false, my lord," Abaddon said quietly, "then I will make war upon his truth." And thus began the slow unraveling of the stars. The Horus heresy was not a scream. It was a whisper. It spread from fleet to fleet like a sickness, invisible but fatal. Brothers spoke of betrayal in hushed tones, of rebellion not yet declared. Ships vanished. Orders were falsified. Whole legions turned their guns inward. At first, Abaddon did not see it as treachery. He saw it as correction. The righting of a wrong, the breaking of false faith. He told himself they were purging corruption, that they were freeing humanity from a lie. But each world they burned left him emptier. For the first time he began to dream, dreams of light swallowed by darkness, dreams of a throne crumbling to ash, dreams of his brothers, dead, burning, faceless. And though he did not yet understand, those dreams were not his own. They were gifts from the warp. When the drop site massacre came, Abaddon fought like a storm unleashed. He led the Justarin across the killing fields of Istvan Fi, slaughtering loyalists without hesitation. He felt the rush of victory, the old fire of conquest, and yet beneath it something colder stirred. He saw the faces of those they killed, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Raven Guard. They did not curse him. They did not even plead. They fought with disbelief in their eyes, as though they could not understand why their brothers had turned on them. And in that moment, neither could he. When he closed his eyes, he still saw their faces. He told himself it was guilt. But guilt requires choice, and choice was something Abaddon no longer possessed. As the war spread, the legions became monsters. The warp whispered louder, and reality bent around its voice. Demons walked beside mortals, and the line between soldier and god blurred. Abaddon fought at Horus's side through it all, his faith unbroken. Yet faith has weight, and his began to crush him. He saw Horus grow darker with every victory. The Warmaster no longer led from the front. He commanded from sanctums filled with shadows, speaking with voices that were not his own. His laughter turned hollow. His touch burned cold. Abaddon still obeyed, still defended, still believed. But sometimes, in the rare quiet between battles, he would look at his reflection in the mirror of his armor, and he would not recognize the eyes that looked back. The heresy burned like a fever through the galaxy. Worlds fell, loyalists died, and the Emperor's dream withered. By the time Horus reached Terra, even the stars seemed dimmer. Abaddon stood with him before the walls of the Imperial Palace, watching the heavens split with fire. He felt the old pride again, the thrill of purpose. But when he looked at his master, truly looked, he saw only ruin wearing a familiar face. The being that had once been Horus Lupercal was now something else, something divine, something monstrous. And for the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced the heart of the son of Horus. He turned his gaze upward, to the distant golden spires of the Imperial Palace, and whispered into the storm, "Father, which of you was right?" The thunder did not answer. The sky above Terra burned. For months the world had been aflame. Oceans turned to steam, continents to glass, cities to ash. Everywhere the eye of Horus was carved into the heavens, a mark of rebellion and blasphemy. The siege of Terra was not war. It was apocalypse. A billion souls cried out in terror, their voices feeding the warp like blood to a wound. Reality itself trembled beneath the weight of it, and at the heart of that storm stood Horus Lupercal, the Warmaster, the greatest son of the Emperor of mankind, and his most terrible failure. Abaddon stood beside him. His armor was blackened by fire, his blade cracked from overuse, his mind numb. He had fought without rest for months, not out of hatred or faith, but because movement was easier than thought. He had stopped asking if this war was right. There was no right left, only the silence that comes before ruin. The Imperial Palace was breaking. The Loyalists had fought until their bodies gave out, until even the Primarchs themselves bled and broke upon its walls. Mortarion, Angron, Fulgrim, each had played their part in the unmaking of the dream. But it was Horus who stood above them all, his ship, the vengeful spirit, hovering like an executioner's blade over the dying world. The Emperor, they said, refused to flee. He stood upon his throne waiting, a god awaiting the judgment of his son. Horus had won. And yet in victory he hesitated. Abaddon saw it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the brief return of the man he had once followed across the stars. "It is not too late," Abaddon whispered once. "We can still—" Horus raised a hand and the words died. There was no anger in his voice, only sorrow. It has been too late since Davin. When the Emperor appeared upon the vengeful spirit, the universe seemed to stop. It was not an entrance, it was revelation. Where he walked, the air burned with light. Demons screamed and vanished. The corrupted decks wept blood. Even Horus stepped back, his godlike arrogance wavering before the radiance of what he had betrayed. Abaddon fell to one knee, not from faith, but because his body could not endure the presence of both father and son in one place. The Emperor looked upon Horus, and for a heartbeat the galaxy was silent. They spoke no words. There was no need. They had said everything to each other once, in pride, in laughter, in love. Now they spoke through the language of gods, through light and shadow, through will and despair. The duel that followed was not a battle. It was creation tearing itself apart. Abaddon could not watch for long. He tried, he truly tried. But the sight was too much for even his war-scarred mind. Every strike of the Emperor's sword sent shockwaves through the ship, ripping apart reality like fabric. Every counter from Horus cracked the veil of the warp, spilling raw madness into the air. The two beings clashed across time itself. To mortal eyes it was light and fire. To Abaddon it was grief. He heard Horus scream the names of the gods who had given him power. He heard the Emperor plead for his son to stop. And for a moment, just one, he thought the Warmaster might listen. But Horus did not stop. He struck once more, and the Emperor's power surged. There was a flash, a blinding, endless light. Then, silence. When Abaddon awoke, he was lying on the deck of the vengeful spirit. The air was still, the demons were gone, the fire had died, and Horus was dead. His body lay upon the dais, vast, terrible, and yet somehow small. The armor that had once gleamed with dark power was shattered, its edges dull and lifeless. The gods had fled their champion. All that remained was a corpse, and the echo of a name that had once commanded the stars. Abaddon fell to his knees beside him. He did not speak, he did not weep, he only stared. The Warmaster's face was peaceful, as if all his rage had finally burned itself away. For the first time he looked human. The ship shuddered around them. The Loyalists were boarding, the legions breaking, the end closing in. Abaddon did not move. The Justeran found him hours later, still kneeling, his gauntlet resting upon Horus's chest as though trying to feel a heartbeat that would never come. When they begged him to flee, he rose slowly. Without a word, he reached down and took up his master's weapon. the talon of Horus. It was still warm, still alive. He looked upon its claws, upon the power that shimmered faintly within, and he understood. If the gods had abandoned Horus, then he would abandon them in turn. If the Emperor had slain his son, then the Imperium itself would burn for it. He lifted the weapon, and for the first time he felt purpose. "You were betrayed," he whispered to the corpse, "by gods and men alike. But I will not be. I will finish what you began, not for them, not even for you, but for us." As the surviving traitor fleets fled into the Eye of Terror, Abaddon stood at the helm of the vengeful spirit. Behind him lay Terra, wounded but not dead. Before him the endless storm of the warp, seething, eternal, alive. He gave the order to enter the storm. The ship turned toward madness, its engines screaming against the pull of reality. And as they vanished into the eye, Abaddon spoke softly to no one. "The galaxy will forget you, Father, but it will remember me." Thus ended the Horus Heresy. The Emperor was broken and entombed upon his golden throne. The Primarchs scattered, some dead, some lost, some damned, and in the depths of the warp a new will began to form. Cold, unyielding, free from both faith and mercy. The first captain had outlived his master, the son had survived the father, and in the silence that followed the death of gods, Ezekiel Abaddon began his rise. The war was over. The galaxy lay broken, its light dimmed, its faith in ruin. Terra burned, the Emperor silent upon his golden throne, half alive, half god. The victors had lost everything, and the defeated had nothing left to lose. From that silence, the long retreat began. The traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror, their fleets fractured, their unity shattered. Worlds once conquered for the Warmaster's glory now burned behind them as loyalist vengeance scoured the void. The warp opened before them, a sea of madness, a storm of thought and nightmare, an empire without light or law. It welcomed them, it devoured them. And within that endless storm, the sons of Horus, once the proud Luna wolves, vanished. The vengeful spirit limped through the storm, wounded and weeping. Its corridors were haunted by echoes, holograms flickering with memories of parades and victories, ghosts of laughter that would never sound again. Abaddon walked those corridors alone. The Justaran followed him in silence, each warrior lost within the hollow space where purpose had once lived. There were no orders, no enemies, no crusade, only drift. The Eye of Terror was no haven. It was a living thing, shifting, breathing, whispering. Planets appeared and vanished within it. Time folded in on itself. Demons hunted through the void like sharks through dark water. The legions built their fortresses on these phantom worlds, each carving out its own dominion of madness. The World Eaters bathed in endless slaughter. The Emperor's children drowned themselves in twisted ecstasy. The Death Guard became walking plagues, and the thousand suns turned inward, searching for meaning in the ruin of souls. But the sons of Horus, they did not build. They decayed. Once they had been first among equals. Now they were the most despised of all. Their brothers blamed them for Horus's fall, for daring to lead, for daring to lose. Every demon lord and warlord within the Eye mocked their name. They called them orphans of failure, the sons of a corpse. Abaddon endured it in silence. He fought those who challenged him. He slew rivals without hesitation. But inside, he felt the same sickness that had taken root in all of them. He had believed in Horus, not as a god, but as a man worth following. Now that man was dust, and in his place stood nothing. For centuries, the sons of Horus drifted between broken moons and demon worlds, their ships scavenging for fuel and memory. Their armor rusted, their faith dissolved. They fought among themselves, tearing apart what little remained of their brotherhood. They became raiders, murderers, scavengers, a legion of ghosts feeding on the carrion of their own legacy. Abaddon watched it happen and said nothing. He fought when he must, killed when he was challenged, and withdrew when he was not. He became a shadow within his own legion, the silent captain who had once led gods, now watching his brothers become beasts. Time had no meaning within the warp. Decades passed like days, centuries like hours. Empires rose and fell within the storm, and the galaxy outside changed without their notice. The Imperium had survived. That, above all, was the cruelest wound. The Emperor, broken and blind, still ruled from his throne. His priests called him divine. His soldiers waged new crusades in his name. His light, dim, flickering, yet alive, still shone across the stars. All Horus had fought for, all they had sacrificed, had been for nothing. In the endless twilight of the warp, Abaddon found himself before the sarcophagus of his fallen master. Horus's body lay entombed within the fortress of Maledictum, a shrine built by those too afraid to move on. The sons of Horus worshipped that corpse. They knelt before it, offered prayers to the shell of a god who had failed them. Some believed his spirit would return. Others whispered that his soul still watched them from the warp. Abaddon felt only disgust. He approached the shrine alone, the whispers of demons echoing like distant thunder. He looked upon the broken armor, the pale flesh sealed in stasis, and saw nothing but weakness. He remembered the man who had laughed beside him, who had led with fire and joy. That man was gone. What lay here was a monument to failure. He reached out and placed his gauntlet upon the glass. "You were our father," he whispered, "and you left us to die." The glass cracked under his touch, and something in him cracked with it. That night, for the first time since Terra, Abaddon dreamed. He stood on the edge of a vast desert beneath a dead sun. The sand was made of ash, and the wind carried whispers of old names: Fulgrim, Lorgar, Angron, Mortarion. Each voice offered him power. Each promised revenge. And above them all, he heard laughter, the laughter of the gods who had once claimed Horus. He ignored them. He walked forward into the storm, and when he woke, he knew what he must do. The long retreat had to end. The sons of Horus had to rise again, not as slaves to a corpse, not as followers of failure, but as something new. He gathered the captains, the warlords, the broken champions who still clung to memory. He spoke not as a priest, not as a prophet, but as a soldier. "The past is dead," he said. "Horus is dead. The emperor rots, the gods laugh, but we still endure. We are not sons. We are not slaves. We are the war that never ends." They listened, and for the first time in 1,000 years they believed. In the depths of the Eye of Terror, a new purpose was born, a whisper becoming a vow becoming a legion. Abaddon turned from the corpse of Horus and walked into the storm, the talon of his master at his side. He did not look back, for the long retreat was over. The rise had begun. The warp was vast and infinite, an ocean of madness where time and memory drowned together, where empires lived and died in a single heartbeat. It was here in that impossible sea that Ezekiel Abaddon was reborn. He had wandered too long in silence, a relic of a war that had forgotten its reason. But silence, even in the Eye of Terror, cannot last forever. In the dark, something began to stir. It began with whispers. Not the demonic kind that clawed at the soul, but memories, the echo of discipline, of unity, of purpose. The sons of Horus had fractured into war bands, each claiming to hold the true will of their fallen master. Some turned to the gods in desperation, others drowned themselves in slaughter and madness. Their once proud colors faded to rust and ash. But Abaddon saw through the chaos. He saw not decay, but potential. The warp was a crucible, and he would forge something within it that no god could command. He began to gather them. At first they resisted. old captains mad with centuries of wandering, demon princes swollen with false divinity, broken champions who ruled over shards of the legion like carrion lords. Each thought himself a king. Each believed the sons of Horus were his to command. Abaddon came to them one by one. He did not parley, he did not threaten, he simply offered them a choice. Submit or be forgotten. Those who refused were erased. The first to fall was Falcus Kibre, a warlord whose arrogance had festered for millennia. He had desecrated the old sigils, painting the eye of Horus with the symbols of demons. He called Abaddon a pretender, a ghost wearing a dead man's shadow. Abaddon answered him with silence. Their duel lasted 9 hours. When it ended, Kibre's head was cast into the void and his warband bent the knee. Words spread like flame through the warp. The first captain had returned. And he was not a relic, he was a reckoning. As the decades passed, more and more came to him. Some for power, some for redemption, some because they remembered what it meant to follow something real. For Abaddon was not like the others. He did not bow to the ruinous powers. He despised them. He had seen what their gifts had done to Horus, how they had used him, hollowed him, discarded him. He would not make that mistake. He would use the gods as they had used men. His rise was not quiet. The other legions took notice. The World Eaters tested his strength. The Word-bearers sought to convert him. The Emperor's children mocked him as a failed relic of a forgotten age. Abaddon crushed them all. He fought across demon worlds and dying suns, his forces swelling with every victory. He did not build an empire. He built an army. And slowly, inevitably, the sons of Horus became something new. Their colors were stripped away, their names erased, their shame burned from their armor. Abaddon gathered them within the eye of terror beneath a blood-red sky and spoke the words that would shape eternity. We are no longer sons of Horus, no longer slaves to the past. We are the Black Legion, the sword that will cut the galaxy free of gods and tyrants alike. The air shook with their roar, and the eye itself seemed to tremble in answer. It was then that he claimed the weapon that would seal his legend, a relic older than Horus, forged from the first wound Chaos had ever cut into reality. The demon sword, Drachnian. The weapon was no mere blade. It was a living thing, a fragment of the warp-given form, a whisper made metal. Legends say it was drawn from the heart of a dying god, that it had slept within the rift between worlds since the dawn of Chaos itself. Many had tried to claim it. All had failed. But when Abaddon reached for it, the blade stilled. The demons within screamed and bowed. The warp bent, and the sword's eye opened. When he took up Drachnian, the warp itself recoiled. The storm quieted for a heartbeat, as if the universe had drawn breath. The power within the blade whispered to him, offering him dominion, offering him worship, offering him godhood. He ignored it. "You will serve," he said simply, "as all things must." And the blade obeyed. From that day onward, he carried 2 weapons, the Talon of Horus and Drachnian, the relics of gods and men, joined in the hands of one who would kneel to neither. He returned then to the remnants of the Legion. They waited armored in black, their banners blank, their faces hidden behind emotionless helms. Abaddon stood before them, the first among them, the last son of a dead age, and raised his weapons to the void. The gods betrayed us. The Emperor abandoned us, Horus failed us, but we remain. We are war eternal, we are the storm that does not end. The warp itself howled in approval. And so began the Black Legion. Years later, when mortals whispered of Abaddon the Despoiler, they would speak of his fury, his conquest, his cruelty. But those who truly understood, those who had stood beside him in the beginning, knew the truth. He was not born of rage. He was born of purpose. He was not the servant of chaos. He was its mirror. The gods had created Horus to destroy the emperor. Now they had created something worse, a man who believed in nothing but himself. And in the endless dark between stars, that belief was enough to make the gods tremble. Thus the first shadow of the Despoiler took form. The long silence was over. The galaxy would soon remember the name of Abaddon. And this time, it would never forget. It began as a whisper in the warp, a tremor felt by astropaths across 1,000 systems, a faint pulse, steady and patient like the heartbeat of something ancient remembering how to live. Then the stars began to die. For 10 millennia, the Imperium had convinced itself that the heresy was over. The traitor legions had been driven into the Eye of Terror, and the Emperor's broken body still glowed faintly upon his golden throne. The priests said it was victory. The soldiers said it was peace. But the truth was simpler. It was waiting. And waiting was Abaddon the Despoiler. He had spent centuries gathering his strength, the broken war bands, the lost fleets, the forgotten champions who still dreamed of vengeance. Worlds within the Eye of Terror had become his forges. Demons bent their knees before him. Even the gods watched in silence, uncertain of what he was becoming. He was not a servant of chaos. He was its weapon. When he moved, he did so without warning, without declaration, without fanfare. The first Black Crusade began as quietly as a breath, a ripple in the storm, a single ship emerging from the warp. Then another, and another. Soon the void above the Cadian gate burned green and black with the arrival of fleets unseen for 10,000 years. Vessels that should not have existed, marked with symbols that had not been spoken since the Heresy. The Imperium's outposts reported the signs too late. By the time the first distress call reached Terra, Abaddon's banners already hung over a dozen worlds. He did not conquer them, he erased them. Every planet he touched became ruin. Every city a silent monument to what happens when gods forget mercy. Yet there was method to the destruction, a rhythm, deliberate and careful, as if he were playing out the first notes of a symphony he had written long ago. The Imperium called it madness. The Inquisition called it heresy. But those who truly studied his war saw something else, a pattern, a purpose, a design that would take 10,000 years to unfold. His enemies came quickly, the Grey Knights, the Imperial Fists, the Black Templars, each seeking to be the one who would end the Despoiler's return. They failed. Abaddon fought with precision, not rage. His armies moved like a single organism, an echo of the unity the Luna Wolves had once known. He wielded the talon of Horus as though it still carried his father's will, and Drachnian howled with a voice that devoured the warp itself. Those who faced him did not call him mortal. They called him prophecy. But what Abaddon sought was not victory. Not yet. He had not come to claim worlds. He had come for something far older. Beneath the ruins of the demon world, Uralan, he descended into catacombs that predated mankind itself. There, hidden beneath the bones of a forgotten empire, he found the Hand of Darkness, a relic from the dark age of technology, capable of shaping matter and thought alike. With it, Abaddon could wound reality. He could open paths where none existed. He could cut the veil between the material and the immaterial. He took it without hesitation. The demons who guarded it screamed in worship. The gods stirred uneasily. And the galaxy, though it did not yet understand why, shuddered. When the First Crusade reached its peak, Abaddon stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, his fleets burning across the Cadian gate like embers on the wind. Before him lay the endless stars of the Imperium. Countless worlds, countless souls, countless lies. He could have pressed onward, taken more, burned brighter. But he did not. He had seen what ambition without purpose had done to Horus. He would not repeat it. The First Crusade was not a conquest. It was a test, a statement. He had returned, and the galaxy was not ready. When the Imperium finally rallied, they found nothing but ashes. The fleets of chaos were gone, vanished back into the Eye of Terror as if swallowed by the storm itself. The scholars of Terra debated what it had meant. Some said it was revenge, others called it madness, but none could explain the symbols left behind. Strange sigils carved into the ruins of every fallen world. They were not demonic. They were mathematical, geometric, precise. Each pointed to a single truth. This was not the end. It was the beginning. Deep within the Eye of Terror, Abaddon watched the Imperial worlds rebuild. He could feel their fear radiating through the warp. That old, familiar arrogance of an empire that believed it had survived. He smiled. The first note had been played. The rest would follow. He had all the time in eternity. His lieutenants gathered before him, lords of the Black Legion, their armor scarred and burning with the light of distant stars. They knelt in silence. Abaddon spoke softly, his voice calm and unyielding. The Imperium calls me Despoiler. They call me monster, heretic, curse. Let them. I am not their enemy. I am their consequence. I am what remains when the lies of gods have burned away. He turned his gaze to the storm, the hand of darkness pulsing faintly within his gauntlet. We will march again. And again. Until all the stars remember who we are, and so ended the first Black Crusade. Not with victory, not with defeat, but with a promise. A promise whispered by the dead to the living. A promise written in fire across the night sky. The Despoiler had returned, and the long war had truly begun. In the endless dark between stars, there are relics that remember more than worlds do. Artifacts older than the Imperium, older even than the birth of man. They carry the memory of creation itself, and sometimes that memory still dreams. One such dream was the Hand of Darkness. No mortal truly knew where it came from. Some whispered it was forged during the dark age of technology, a remnant of mankind's forgotten golden age. Others claimed it was far older, a piece of the old night born from the heart of the warp itself. Whatever the truth, the artifact was no simple weapon. It was potential made solid, the power to command the fundamental shape of matter, to rewrite the laws that bound the universe. Most who touched it dissolved into nothingness. A few became gods, briefly. But when Abaddon the Despoiler held it, the relic stilled. The Eye of Terror trembled that day. Those who served him remembered it as a silence that fell across the warp, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. Abaddon stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, the hand pulsing faintly within his gauntlet. Its black metal gleamed like polished void, and within its surface moved the faint suggestion of stars, tiny galaxies swirling in patterns that could not exist in nature. His sorcerers trembled before it. Even his most devoted lieutenants averted their gaze. But Abaddon only watched. He could feel the artifact listening, and he understood. The Hand of Darkness did not want to rule, it wanted to shape. It was a tool, not a god. And that, above all, was why Abaddon trusted it. He raised the gauntlet, and the air around him shimmered. Metal groaned, reality rippled like water. He could feel the veil between the material and the immaterial thin. The warp's song became clearer, its whispers aligning with his heartbeat. With this relic, he could open doors where none existed. He could carve a path through the madness of the Eye itself. He could bind demons and shatter their masters. The gods had their toys. Now he had his. But power demands tribute, and the Eye of Terror noticed. The demons came first, vast and formless, drawn to the relic's pulse. They surrounded the vengeful spirit in silence, their shapes bleeding across reality, their voices whispering promises and threats in the same breath. Abaddon did not flinch. He stepped forward, Drachnian in one hand, the hand of darkness in the other. "Come then," he said quietly. "See what becomes of gods when men stop believing." The demons attacked, and the eye screamed. For 7 days the storm burned. The vengeful spirit vanished from all scanners, its presence erased from the warp. Only the faintest tremors reached the demon worlds, like thunder heard across the end of time. When the ship reappeared, its hull was scarred by fire that did not exist in any physical spectrum. Its crew whispered of shadows walking through metal, of voices weeping inside their armor. Abaddon emerged unchanged, the hand still pulsed at his side. The demons were gone. He had not just survived their assault, he had bound them. The Black Legion sorcerers called it impossible. The gods called it blasphemy. Abaddon called it proof. He had no need for faith, only will. After that, the relic became more than a weapon. It was the key that opened the path of empire. With the hand of darkness, Abaddon carved channels through the warp itself, forging new routes where no navigator could guide a ship. He could strike anywhere, vanish into the eye, and reappear across the galaxy before his enemies could react. The Imperium called these incursions miracles of evil. The Inquisition called them warp fractures, but Abaddon called them what they were: designs. Each strike, each crusade, each loss, all were part of the same pattern, the same slow shaping of a galaxy that no longer knew it was being remade. Yet even as his power grew, Abaddon never fell to worship. He had seen what belief did to men like Lorgar, how it twisted Fulgrim, how it consumed Magnus, how it enslaved them all. He would not kneel. He would not beg. He would take what he needed and discard the rest. The gods hated him for it. They whispered curses into his dreams, sent visions of torment and temptation. But Abaddon learned to listen without hearing. He was not their champion. He was their reminder that even gods could bleed. He tested the relic's power across 1,000 worlds. He used it to silence demon princes, to rebuild lost fortresses, to open gates across the warp that even the Emperor's might could not close. The Black Legion followed him as if he were fate itself. To them, the hand was not a weapon. It was direction. Proof that their master had seen beyond the madness, that his war had meaning where others only had hunger. And though they did not understand his design, they obeyed. In time, Abaddon stood alone upon the viewing deck of the vengeful spirit, watching the warp flicker and shift. He could see its storms forming patterns, invisible to most but clear to him now, like constellations made of chaos, like the faint outline of something vast being drawn across eternity. He raised the hand, and the stars themselves seemed to pause. "You are not my god," he whispered to the relic. "You are my tool. And through you I will teach this galaxy that nothing, not emperor, not demon, not destiny, is beyond my reach." The hand glowed faintly, and for a heartbeat the eye of terror stilled. Far away in the depths of the warp, the gods stirred uneasily. They had forged countless champions, each proud, each doomed. But this one was different. He did not seek their favor. He did not beg for their gifts. He did not fear them. And in the quiet between their thoughts, for the first time in eternity, the gods themselves felt something unfamiliar: doubt. For 10,000 years, the Imperium had told itself the same story: that chaos had been contained, that the Eye of Terror was a prison, that the Long War was a myth kept alive by fear. But fear remembers what truth forgets. And on the day the eye began to widen, the galaxy remembered too. The omens came first, astropaths driven mad by silence, warp storms flickering like candlelight, planets waking to nightmares they had buried in scripture. Then the skies of Cadia turned black. Every sensor in the Cadian gate recorded the same impossible reading: a gravitational surge, vast and deliberate, as though something ancient were stirring beneath the warp itself. And at the heart of that tremor, a fleet emerged. Black, endless, silent. The 13th Black Crusade had begun. It was not a fleet as mortals understood it. It was a tide, a storm given shape, an empire of iron and corruption moving with purpose. The Imperium scouts called it Abaddon's Armada. Those who had seen it and lived called it by another name: the End. For millennia, Abaddon had tested the Imperium. He had struck and withdrawn again. Each wore a step in a pattern too vast for mortals to see. Now the pattern was complete. Every artifact, every relic, every fragment of forbidden knowledge, all had led to this. He stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, the hand of darkness pulsing faintly in his gauntlet, Drachnian humming with restrained hunger. The warp parted before him like a wound. Through it he could see Cadia, the fortress world, the gatekeeper of the Imperium, the world that had defied chaos longer than memory. He whispered a single word: "Now." And reality broke. The assault was not an invasion. It was revelation. The skies of Cadia split open. Demons poured through in numbers too great to count, their forms bending light, their laughter carrying through the vacuum of space. Imperial fleets met them head-on, their guns blazing, their prayers rising to the throne. For a time, they held. They always held. But this time was different. Abaddon had not come to take Cadia. He had come to end it. In orbit, the Blackstone fortresses moved. Once ancient weapons of unimaginable power, now bent to his will through the hand of darkness. Each fortress was a world unto itself, a relic of the old ones, a scar of creation still bleeding light. Abaddon turned them against Cadia. The void burned white, then green, then silent. The planet's surface split open, mountains folding like cloth, oceans vanishing into vapor. Still the Cadians fought. They fought until the ground itself betrayed them, until the sky became fire, until the stars began to fall. And even then, they did not yield. Abaddon watched from orbit, expressionless. He felt no triumph, no joy, no hatred, only completion. The Imperium's might had been broken. The gate that had held chaos at bay for 10,000 years was gone. The Cadian gate was open, and through it the Eye of Terror began to breathe. The warp storm expanded, its edges burning across the void, devouring systems once thought safe. Space and time collapsed into each other, reality folding under the weight of its own nightmare. Worlds vanished overnight, others were reborn, twisted and impossible. The galaxy itself changed shape. And in that moment, Abaddon became what Horus had never been, a god in all but name. On Terra, the priests screamed prophecies. They said the end had come, that the golden throne would fail, that the Astronomican's light would die, and yet through the fear, through the collapse of order, something else happened. The Imperium awoke. Across the void, armies that had grown complacent stirred. Worlds that had slept beneath the Emperor's shadow remembered what war meant. And in that unity born of terror, Abaddon found what he had wanted all along: balance. The galaxy was alive again. On the surface of Cadia's shattered remains, amid fire and ruin, a single imperial banner still stood. Abaddon descended alone. He walked across fields of molten glass, the air still heavy with the ghosts of 1 billion dead. At the base of the last fortress, he found a lone guardsman half buried in rubble, rifle still clutched in trembling hands. The man looked up. His eyes were filled not with fear but with defiance. "You'll never win," he said. "The Emperor protects." Abaddon paused, the faintest echo of something, memory perhaps, stirring deep within him. Then let him. He turned, and the wind carried the man's prayer into silence. The destruction of Cadia sent ripples through all of existence. The warp howled in triumph, the gods shrieked in delight, but Abaddon did not celebrate. He looked upon what he had done, and for the first time in memory he smiled. not in joy, but in understanding. Victory was an illusion. Only motion mattered, only will. The long war would never end, and that was as it should be. The Imperium would rebuild because it always did. Chaos would rise again because it always would. And between them stood Abaddon, not to end the war but to ensure it never truly died. He turned back to the stars, his fleet waiting, the warp pulsing around him like a living heart. "This galaxy belongs to no one," he whispered. "Not gods, not men, not fate. Only to those who refuse to end." The storm swallowed his voice, the stars dimmed, and somewhere in the dark, a new crusade began to form. Thus ended the 13th Black Crusade, not with peace, not with conquest, but with truth, that there is no end. Only the endless rhythm of destruction and rebirth, the heartbeat of a galaxy forever at war and forever alive. The galaxy had changed. The stars themselves seemed dimmer now, their light filtered through the breathing wound that was the cicatrix maledictum, the great scar in reality, the proof that the universe itself could bleed. Half the Imperium was lost beyond that living shadow. Worlds vanished into madness, warp tides swallowed fleets whole, empires fractured, faith faltered, and still the war went on. At the heart of it all, moving through the ruin like a calm at the center of a storm, was Abaddon the Despoiler. He no longer needed to announce his crusades. The galaxy knew when he was coming. Worlds felt it in their bones, their suns dimming as his fleets drew near, their prophets screaming before the first shot was fired. He had become less a man than a law, a correction to the arrogance of gods and mortals alike. The Imperium called him the eternal traitor. The Chaos gods called him Lord of the End Times. But he cared for neither. Names were for the living. He was long beyond that. Within the vengeful spirit, he walked halls older than recorded history. Each step echoed through metal that remembered the screams of the heresy, the laughter of demons, the prayers of men who thought themselves immortal. At the heart of the ship, in a chamber lit by the pale glow of the warp, hung banners from every crusade, 13 wars that had shaped the galaxy, 13 verses in the same endless song. Abaddon stood before them in silence. Around him knelt his lieutenants, lords of the Black Legion, each a fragment of the will he had forged into an empire. They waited for his word, but none came. He was listening. The warp was alive around him. It whispered, screamed, sang. The voices of the gods, the pleading of mortals, the quiet hum of existence itself. They all asked the same question: what comes next? Abaddon did not answer, because he already knew. There was no next. There was only continuation. The long war was not a means to an end. It was the end itself, a cycle that bound reality together. For without conflict, there was stagnation. Without opposition, there was rot. He had seen what peace did to gods. He would not allow it to happen to the galaxy. The gods offered him apotheosis. Each one promised eternity in its image. Khorne offered dominion through slaughter. Tzeentch promised omniscience. Nurgle offered immortality through decay. Slaanesh whispered endless perfection. Abaddon listened to them all. Then he laughed. "I have seen your eternity," he said, "and it is small." He had no need to be their god. He had become their purpose. When he waged war, they grew stronger. When he conquered, they feasted. When he rested, they withered. The gods of chaos, eternal and unbound, were sustained by the will of a mortal who refused to die, and they hated him for it. In the depths of the Eye of Terror, Abaddon built something new, not temples, not empires, something purer. Order within the chaos, discipline among the damned, a hierarchy forged not by faith but by will. The Black Legion became the model, not the most numerous but the most absolute. Every warrior, every sorcerer, every demon bound by a single truth. We serve not the gods, but the war. Among his chosen were legends in their own right: Cadia the Black, whose sorcery could silence demons; Leorvin Ukris, whose laughter had echoed since the fall of Chthoniya; Iskandar Cadia, the chronicler of his rise; and countless others whose names had once been curses. Together they became the court of a king who called himself no king. A congregation of the damned united not by worship but by clarity. They did not need hope, they needed direction. And Abaddon gave it to them wordlessly, effortlessly, through the gravity of certainty. The Imperium watched his rise with dread. They whispered that he could not be killed. They said he was immortal, that the warp itself protected him. But the truth was simpler. He endured because he refused to end. Every time he fell, he rose again. Every defeat was a feint, every loss a lesson. Even the gods who had watched empires crumble and stars die began to understand the meaning of his name. The Despoiler. Not merely destroyer, but reclaimer. The one who took back what creation had squandered. One night, though night had no meaning within the eye, Abaddon stood before the viewing deck of the vengeful spirit. The warp outside pulsed like a living sea. He could see shapes forming within it, shadows of things yet to come, wars yet to be fought. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply existed, perfectly aligned with the endless rhythm of conflict and calm. Behind him, Cadia spoke quietly. "The galaxy believes you seek victory." Abaddon did not turn. Victory is illusion. There is no end to this war, only participation. "And when all is dust?" Cadia asked. Abaddon's voice was a whisper. "Then we will make more dust." For all his might, for all his wisdom and will, there remained one truth that Abaddon never forgot. He was still mortal, still bound by memory. In the stillness of the warp, he sometimes saw Horus, not as he died, but as he had been, smiling, proud, alive. The memory did not haunt him. It strengthened him. Horus had tried to change the galaxy. Abaddon understood that the galaxy cannot change. It can only be maintained, rewritten endlessly in fire and iron. That was his purpose, that was his curse. And so the Despoiler ascended, not to heaven, not to demonhood, but to the only kind of godhood worth having: understanding. He did not need worship, he did not need praise, he needed only conflict. For in conflict there was life. In struggle there was truth. In endless war there was meaning. The galaxy would burn, rebuild, and burn again, and through it all, Abaddon would remain. The unending reflection of mankind's will to survive, even when survival meant destruction. "They will remember Horus as the one who fell," he whispered to the stars. "They will remember the Emperor as the one who ascended. But I will be the one who endures, will be." The warp rippled in silent answer. The gods listened and said nothing. For in the grim darkness of the far future, where even eternity trembles, some things do not need to be believed to be true. They simply are. And among them stands Abaddon the Despoiler. The war that never ends, the silence between heartbeats, the shadow that never fades. In the far future, there is no peace. There is no dawn that is not lit by fire. There is no empire that is not cracked from within. There is no throne that does not tremble. There is only war. That is what the Imperium teaches. That is what the cults chant. That is what soldiers whisper to themselves as they die nameless on forgotten worlds. But the truth is quieter than that. The truth is not fury. The truth is not rage. The truth is will. The truth is endurance. The truth is that the war continues because someone chooses that it must, that someone is Abaddon. By the time the galaxy learned his name in fear, he had already shaped their fate. Worlds burned in his shadow. Systems vanished into the warp's mouth at his command. Armies fought and died simply because he moved his hand across a hololith and said without emotion, "Here." But for all the devastation that followed him, he was not a creature of chaos. Not in the way lesser minds understood the word. Chaos is impulse. Chaos is hunger. Chaos is need. Abaddon was none of those things. He was intention. Where others raged, he calculated. Where others worshipped, he endured. Where others sought victory, he sought momentum. Because he understood what no Primarch truly had and what no Imperial Saint ever would. The galaxy requires pressure to stay alive. Without conflict, it would stagnate. Without threat, it would decay. Without terror, mankind would forget what it is. Humanity, he believed, was not meant for comfort. It was meant for survival. And survival is never gentle. The Imperium called him a butcher. The Ecclesiarchy named him the Great Blasphemy, the Shadow of the Warmaster, the Fist of the Warp. In truth, those titles were small. Abaddon was not the end of the Imperium. He was the reason it still existed. Because in his existence, it is forced to struggle. And in that struggle, it refuses to die. He did not think of it as mercy. There was no mercy in him. But in his quiet way, there was balance. When the Imperium grew too swollen and arrogant in its holy mission, he shattered its pride. When it teetered on the edge of collapse, he struck hard enough to wake it, but not hard enough to erase it. Too strong, and mankind becomes tyrant. Too weak, and mankind becomes prey. He would allow neither. To the Imperium, he is an executioner. To himself, he is an editor. He cuts, he corrects, he removes weakness. Not because he loves mankind, not because he hates it, but because it is the only thing in the galaxy that still fights. Like it deserves to exist, he walks the bridge of the vengeful spirit, and time means nothing. He has lived through ages that erased entire cultures from memory. He has watched the children of Primarchs become myths and the Primarchs themselves become prayers. He has seen saints rise and burn like candles, and he has snuffed them out with a gesture. And yet, he has never once considered himself immortal. Immortality implies divinity, and divinity implies distance. Abaddon is not distant. He is present. He is in the mud when cities fall. He is in the void when planets crack. He is in the silence between bolter fire and final breath. When worlds speak his name, they do not speak of a god. They speak of an arrival. The Despoiler is here, they say. Not he will come. He is here. As if he has always been here. As if he always will be. He does not rest. He does not retire. He does not relent. There is no after. There is only now, stretched across millennia like a blade. The Long War is not a campaign. It is an environment. It is the air the galaxy breathes. And he is its pressure system. Sometimes, rarely, a mortal will stand before him and ask the question all mortals eventually ask. Why? It is almost innocent, almost hopeful, as if some part of them believes there is still a reason, still a place for meaning, still a chance that if they understand his motive, the knife will fall slower. When they ask, he sometimes answers, not kindly, not cruelly, simply truthfully. Because endings are lies. He has seen too many promises of victory, of finality, of salvation. He watched Horus promise to free humanity. He watched the Emperor promise to unify it. Both failed, both broke, both bled, and both of them in their own way tried to end something. End the old order, end the darkness, end the lies. Abaddon learned from their failure. There is no end. There is only continuation. And continuation must be enforced. He is not without memory. In the deep hours when the warp hums low and predatory beyond the hull, when even demons go quiet, Abaddon still remembers. Chthoniya, the Luna Wolves, the laughter of brothers, the hand on his shoulder heavy and certain before a battle that seemed like it would last forever. He remembers Horus. But he does not worship him. Other warlords wear the eye of Horus as a relic. They painted on their armor like a prayer to a dead age, a symbol of borrowed legitimacy. Abaddon wears it as a warning. Horus was powerful. Horus was loved. Horus fell. That is the lesson, not his glory, his failure. Abaddon carries the talon of Horus not as reverence, but as possession. A reminder that he, and not the dead, wields it now. The age of suns ended when the Warmaster died. This is the age of the one who survived. He does not act alone. That is another of his strengths. The Black Legion is not a mob of berserkers or worship-drunk fanatics. It is an organism, a network of will. Where others devolve into cults, he maintains structure. Where others fracture into rival claimants, he unifies. His lieutenants do not love him. They do not need to. They obey because he gives them what the gods never did, direction. And in return, they give him reach. Through them, his will stretches across warp storms, across dead sectors, across half a galaxy broken in two. Planets fall to his name not because he stands upon them, but because his truth arrives there first. This is no longer war in the old sense. This is pressure applied to the entire shape of reality. This is orchestration. The Imperium prays for his death. Inquisitors build their lives around hunting him. Saints rise with his name already burning on their tongues. Every prophecy, every forbidden vision, every desperate sermon ends the same way. The Despoiler must fall. But even in that plea, there is a quiet surrender. They do not say the war must end. They say the Despoiler must fall. They understand, even if they will never confess it aloud, the war cannot end. It can only change hands. Abaddon knows this. He accepts it. He does not dream of thrones. He has no hunger for crowns, no interest in rulership in the way mortals define it. Empire is a posture. Rule is a performance. He cares for neither. He is not here to sit. He is here to act. That is why he is terrifying. That is why his name endures when others become dust. That is why, in the long quiet between one galaxy's age and the next, his shadow will still be there. Not screaming, not raging, simply present. Waiting. Applying pressure, ensuring that existence does not fall asleep. In the end, Abaddon the Despoiler is not simply the enemy of the Imperium. He is the twin of the Imperium. It cannot die while he stands against it. He cannot fade while it resists him. They define each other. They feed each other. They keep each other alive by trying to destroy each other. That is the truth no priest will speak. That is the truth no demon will whisper. That is the truth Abaddon understood the moment he watched the Emperor and Horus destroy each other on the deck of the Vengeful Spirit, and knew, with absolute clarity, I am what comes after. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But war, like anything that lasts forever, needs a will that will not break. That will has a name. It is not the Emperor, it is not Horus, it is not any god that feeds in the warp. It is Abaddon, the Despoiler, the bearer of the talon, the wielder of the blade, the voice of the long war, the hand that does not release, the proof that the galaxy will never be allowed to sleep. Not while he still draws breath, not while reality still burns, not while there is one star left to dim. And so, the galaxy turns once more. The fires burn, the stars dim, and in the space between them, he waits. Abaddon the Despoiler. The hand that never rests, the will that never fades. In his shadow, empires rise and fall, and though the wars will never end, there is a strange peace in that, because as long as the war continues, the galaxy is still alive. If you've journeyed this far with me tonight, rest now. Let the echoes of the long war fade into dreams, and when you wake, tell me, which story should we whisper next? The rise of the Primarchs, the fall of Sanguinius, the awakening of the Tyranids? Leave your choice below, and together we'll wander the darkness again. Until then, Sleep well, child of the 41st millennium, for even in endless